Okay, it's really not getting any better. I can't believe that 8 episodes have gone by now and we still don't have that much information. We don't really know much more than we knew in episode 4. It's kind of crazy how slow the plot is moving forward. Despite that, there's still somehow a lot to talk about. So let's just get right into it. The episode opens up where we left off, with Vatic in control of the Titan, and she's smoking because it looks really cool, I guess. I have no idea. Why a changeling would enjoy smoking doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And she obviously wants Jack Crusher. So she shuts down power on the ship, and everything is apparently accessed in the bridge where she is. So nobody can do anything. And pretty much all she'll talk about this entire episode is Jack Crusher. That's all she wants. And elsewhere on the ship, Geordi finally unplugs Data, proving once and for all that if he had just done that before the events of the last episode, none of this shit would have happened. And we see a bunch of crew members getting slaughtered throughout the ship by Vatic's goons. So that's nice. And Jack Crusher's eyes go red again. But that seems to be just a signal to the audience because no one else ever seems to notice that his eyes are red. And he sees through the eyes of a crew member in a dark corridor and he gets killed. Fantastic. And on the bridge, Vatic is having some fun with her prisoners. She goes down the line looking at them with sinister intent. And Shaw is useless. Is he the captain of this ship? If you didn't know anything about the previous 7 episodes and you just tuned in, would you know that Shaw is supposed to be the captain of the Titan? Because I wouldn't. He might as well be a junior officer. The only time he's the captain is when the rest of the characters allow him to be the captain. He never takes charge. He never says anything to Vatic on behalf of his crew. And I guess it's because he's a fucking coward. He never pleads for any of their lives. Maybe it's unfair to call him a coward because he tells Seven that he wishes she sacrificed his life to kill Vatic. Fair enough, but he doesn't try to negotiate or anything. He's not really the captain. And then Vatic gets on the loudspeaker and asks for Jack Crusher again. Then we get an external shot of the Shrike, and it once again makes that bellowing horn sound that we hear every time it's on screen. It's like a Reaper from Mass Effect. I mean, it's kind of the same sound. I've mentioned Mass Effect a lot in these videos, and I think it's because they've taken more than a little inspiration from various things. And we see Riker and Troi in their cell on the Shrike. They reconcile their differences, although I can't believe this show never gave us a scene where Riker questions whether or not he's actually talking to Troi. It's unbelievable. And she says a changeling came to their house pretending to be Riker. She jokes and says the changeling was good in bed and bad at pizza. Hilarious. She also says that she knew they were imposters the moment they arrived. So I guess there was more than one with Riker, with the Riker changeling. I mean, wouldn't that alone be a red flag? And she can't really read changelings, which makes me wonder why Betazoids haven't been used more often to detect changelings. Because if you're getting nothing from someone, that must mean they're probably a changeling. Opens up a whole can of worms. Because I kind of doubt that Dr. Bashir, when he was replaced by a changeling, I doubt that he never ran into a Betazoid crew member the entire time he was around on Deep Space Nine. But whatever. And Riker says, with any luck, Jean-Luc has set a classic Captain Picard trap, and right now he's got her on the ropes, which is clearly a reference to Undiscovered Country when Spock says, if I know the captain, he is deep into planning his escape, referring to the Rurapente prison. And then it shows him getting his ass kicked. It's just another reference. I mean, even the lines of dialogue are referencing other things. It makes so much sense. I mean, why do something new when you can just rip off something else? And where the hell is Riker and Troi's daughter? Did the changelings just let her go? Seems like she'd be in an even bigger bargaining chip than Troi. I mean, she's mentioned, but they don't say where she is or what she's doing, or if she's safe or anything. We have no idea. And then Seven and Shaw whisper to each other while they're being held captive on the bridge. Shaw says Seven should have blown the turbolift, which apparently is not a euphemism. He says Seven should have destroyed the turbolift while Vatic was on the way to the bridge. She didn't because Shaw was in the turbolift as well. And she says she'd do the same thing again. She draws the line at trading lives, which is a lie. She's fine with trading lives. The crew is being slaughtered right now because she didn't do it. And if this was an option, what would Vatic have done if Shaw didn't stumble into her turbolift in the last episode? Seven would have just destroyed it, and she'd be dead. So once again, Vatic is just lucky. And Vatic says she will execute a crewman every 10 minutes until she has Jack. This episode is essentially like the plot of Air Force One. Even some of the dialogue is exactly the same, as we'll soon see. And Jack is talking to Picard and Beverly, somewhere on the ship. He thinks he can retake the bridge with his new mind control powers. He explains that he can do this, and they seem to buy it. And Picard says high-ranking Starfleet officers are given an override codex to lock down a ship, or unlock it. So, if Jack can take control of someone and use Picard's code, they might be able to get the ship back. And it apparently has to be done on the bridge, because she has control over every console on the ship, except on the bridge. Which, I don't know. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but whatever. So Jack's eyes go red. He takes control over the Bajoran dude on the bridge. He starts entering a code in a nearby console, but Vatic sees this and stops him, and she realizes that it's Jack in control. And then Vatic starts threatening the crew again. And it's so mindless because she never threatens Seven or Shaw. Only these glorified red shirts are in danger. And I don't care what you claim. No one cares about any of them. We do not know them. They are inconsequential. I see fans on Twitter talking about the bridge crew of the Titan as though they are fully fleshed out characters. And it's fucking mind-numbing. Beyond their names and appearance, what can you even tell me about them? Nothing. Dick. So please don't pretend like this is a tense scene. It's not. I'll agree that it's callous and mean-spirited, sure. But nothing is really at stake here. Vatic threatens the Bajoran lieutenant and this ensign, but ultimately kills the Vulcan science officer. You know, the one who is always telling the crew what the problem is, but never actually is involved in the solution. And I don't care. She could have killed every single one of them, and I would not feel like we lost that much. I mean, it would have been brutal to watch, because it's mindless suffering, but we have no attachment to these characters. They're one-dimensional. And Shaw and Seven were never in danger. Now, I agree that it's callous, but it's just overall, it's kind of nasty. And I will not be mourning for a character whose name was probably mentioned once and hasn't even had so much as a speaking line in the last couple of episodes. I mean, Jesus. And we hear the sound of the Shrike's fucking didgeridoo again. So that means we're going to get another scene with Troi and Riker in their cell. It's dramatic stuff about their son's death. It's a somewhat decent scene, and it's certainly well acted, at least until they start talking about their house and how they both hate it. So they've been living in a place that neither of them want to live in for years. Okay. And then a guard walks in, and Riker instantly shoves him and says, "Don't touch her," which is kind of weird because it didn't seem like he was making a move towards her. He just kind of shoves him right away. And it's good because Worf was standing right behind this dude and he stabs him in the back. How honorable of him. And then he shoots him with a phaser to finish the job. And we're just never going to find out what these henchmen are. It's never going to be explained. It will only be fully explained in some tie-in comic book that I'll have no desire to read because I hate this show. And then Worf has some cringe dialogue. My only note for this scene is Worf cringe. That's all it says, 2 words. He basically gets a little lovey-dovey with Troi. Says how much he missed her, and he gets fucking poetic and weird. I can't figure out what the point of this was. I think it was supposed to be funny. And it was also definitely supposed to remind you that Worf and Troi dated for about a fortnight, like 25 years ago. So it's a member berry. Doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, as long as it makes you member. And in engineering, I have no idea why Vatic's goons haven't checked this area, but they haven't. Anyway, Geordi, Picard, and Beverly decide that they need Data's help to access the ship's systems. And in order to do this, they think Data needs to erase Lore. But Data's ethical subroutines won't allow him to take a life, which is not entirely true. Data was definitely going to kill Kivas Fajo in cold blood back in the Most Toys. Not that anyone could blame him, but it does show that he's capable. And basically what they want to do is remove the partition between Data and Lore and hope that Data takes over. Because if Lore takes over, they're fucked. And on the Shrike, Worf, Riker, and Troi meet up with Raffi. And Worf knows it's really Raffi and not a changeling because Raffi is like, hey, it's really me. No further questions are asked. Okay, fine. And they find Picard's dead body, his human body. They discovered that they removed parts of his brain that were infected with Irumodic syndrome. No reason is given. And an alarm goes off, and they have to get back to Worf's shuttle, which is cloaked. I don't know how they got a cloaked shuttle. That's never really explained. It's a big crime that the Titan is using a cloaking device. But Worf is running around in a cloaked shuttle, and it's fine. Unless I missed something. That's always possible. Maybe it's not a Federation shuttle. Who knows? I don't think we ever actually see it, so I'm not totally sure, but that seems a little weird to me. And on the Titan, Jack shows up on the bridge. And it seems like he has the upper hand. Why?
Because he's holding a thermal detonator.
Yep, he just has a thermal detonator. I mean, that's exactly what this scene is. Now we're just using nostalgia from other franchises. And Vatic tells her goons to take the bridge crew and lock them in the briefing room. And that's important, because if she doesn't do that, Jack's plan would not have worked, as we'll soon see. But Seven demands to stay. And for some reason, Vatic lets her. And Jack asks what Vatic wants from him. She says his gifts. And then she begins a mindless villain monologue where she says absolutely nothing. She talks a lot, but she's saying nothing. For someone who is so short on time, you'd think she would be just getting to the point. Why is she speechifying this much? But she is, and we have to suffer through it. Remember when the last episode ended and she said to Jack, "It's time you found out who you really are"? Well, I guess that was a lie, because she never fucking says it. And while all this is going on, Data and Lore are talking to each other in Data's head, as you do. We see all sorts of member berries, Sherlock Holmes references. He holds Tasha Yar's hologram in his hands, a deck of cards from poker, and even Spot, his cat. It's another nostalgia circle jerk. And it seems like Data is surrendering his memories to Lore. It seems like Lore has won and has taken over, but he hasn't. This whole time, Data used his memories to somehow absorb Lore. This show literally weaponized nostalgia to use against one of the villains. It's a fucking ridiculous message that this scene seems to be saying. It's crazy. It's basically saying that all you are is your memories. That's all that matters, is your nostalgia. Which is a very fitting message, considering the mindlessness we've been subjected to up until this point. A friend of mine, the cynical optimist, pointed this out on Twitter. In The Measure of a Man, Bruce Maddox wanted to make a copy of Data's memories in order to try to preserve Data during his experiments. And the whole episode argues against that. Data is more than what he remembers. Everyone is more than their memories. Your personality, your intellect, your philosophy, your sense of humor, your ideology. I mean, memories are a big part of it. I'm not saying otherwise, but that's not all you are. Nostalgia is great. I'm not against it, but it's not everything. And this show seems to be saying it's everything. In any case, Data is back. He takes control of the ship and says he's pissed off. So obviously this is a very different Data. And Rafi boards the Titan and starts taking out all the goons like she's Bruce Lee. And I want to talk about Rafi at some point. I've not really gone into a lot with her because mostly she's basically filling the Elnor role in a lot of ways. She just fights in this episode. But remember early in the season when she was forced to do drugs by that Ferengi? You'd think that would have been an issue going forward, but it hasn't been at all. You might not even know it happened. It's just crazy what they've decided to do with Rafi. And I don't like that they've swept under the rug her relationship with Seven. I mean, it just feels silly to me. It's like they want the illusion of inclusion. That's tough to say. But you know what I mean? Like they want you to believe that you're seeing representation. But you're not. Because they rarely show it. Especially in this season. And I think it's because they're cowards who don't want to piss anybody off. If you're going to put Seven in a relationship with another woman, fine. Show it. Let's see it. Let's see that dynamic. Anyway, moving on. And it turns out that Jack's thermal detonator isn't actually a thermal detonator. It's a bubble shield from Halo. So we're just going from one piece of famous sci-fi tech to another. And Jack and Seven take cover inside of it, obviously, while Data opens the view screen. Yeah, apparently the view screen is just a hatch that can be opened at any time. And she gets sucked out into space.
Correction, sir. That's blown out.
My mistake. And Seven also says, "Get off my bridge." I mean, what does that remind you of?
Get off my plane.
Just mindless, just brain dead. And I guess it really is her bridge, because Shaw is an absentee captain. And if Vatic hadn't ordered the bridge crew into the next room, they all would have been sucked out into space along with her. Or, excuse me, blown out. Sorry. And granted, she does do it because Jack wanted her to do that. He asks for it to happen. But, I don't know. It just seems lucky that she relented and did it without any questions. And it seems like Vatic is killed. She freezes, breaks into a million pieces, and probably explodes when the Titan fires on the Shrike, destroying it once and for all. But I have no idea why Vatic can't survive in the vacuum of space. Because changelings can do that. Laz did it on Deep Space Nine. He was basically a baby changeling. And he was still able to do it. So you're telling me that a super advanced changeling can't live in the vacuum of space? And I suppose she could still be alive. We can't rule that out. But if she is still alive, well, that's a cop-out too, because they went to pretty extreme lengths to convince you that she's dead. Frozen, smashed into bits, and exploded. And Worf is walking around the Titan, vaporizing dead bad guys. Once again, just mindless callousness. And Troi says she senses a darkness on the Titan. Yeah, no shit. They don't know how to turn on the fucking lights on this ship. Of course there's a darkness. But she's referring to Jack, obviously. She says Frontier Day is tied directly with Jack, and that there's a darkness with that boy, that 48-year-old boy. They all reunite in the briefing room. Picard, Riker, Worf, Data, Troi, Beverly, and Geordi. And Data is kind of giddy and weird. They essentially made him human, which I think kind of cheapens his aspirations to be human. He was always striving for that, but he knew it was unattainable. He once specifically told Q and Riker, when Riker was a Q for a short time, to not make him human. But now it's okay? Why? Because some scientist made it happen in a lab? I just think Data would rather get there on his own, if possible. Anyway, maybe that's a nitpick. I don't know. Troi decides she's going to try to get into Jack's head and figure out what's going on with him. He talks about the red door he's been seeing, and he's afraid to open it. Troi convinces him to do so, and the episode ends. And fuck you. Because we ended last week's episode with the promise of finding out what the fuck's going on with Jack Crusher. And this episode has come to an end, and we still don't know. Honestly, almost nothing has been accomplished in the last few episodes. So the last 2 episodes are just going to be nothing but a nostalgia-laced information dump. That's all it's going to be. It's fucking mindless. I'm sorry if I'm coming off like I'm losing it. I don't mean to. It's just this show is frustrating to me. I don't know how to explain it. I don't get what people are getting out of it. Star Trek used to be smart. And when it wasn't smart, it was usually at least trying to be. It had allegory, a message. It had morals. This is mindless action, disguised by endless amounts of nostalgia. Anyway, 2 episodes left. Hooray. Let me know what you thought of this one. And until next time, take it easy.